Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Turning Your Community Idea into a Grant Application. Happy that you can join us today. Um, we're gonna get started, and I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Perla Medina Alvarez, and I use the pronouns she, her, and ella, and I work at Alai Community Consulting. And later you'll find out a little bit more about our firm. But first, I want to pass it over to my colleague, Linny, who's gonna introduce herself.
Hello, good morning or good afternoon, depending when you're checking in on our webinar today. My name is Linny Brown. I am the co-director at the Northwest Environmental Justice Center, and I'm really happy to be here. Alai?
Hi everyone, buenos días, buenas tardes, buen día. It's so nice to be here with all of you. Thank you for listening to us and participating in this way, in this conversation about ideas and grant making. I'm Alai Reyes-Santos. I go by she, her, ella pronouns. I'm thrilled to be here with my colleagues Perla and Lenny.
Great. Alai, could you tell us a little bit about Alai Community Consulting?
Yeah, my pleasure. So I'm so happy and honored to work with an amazing team of people at Alai Community Consulting. Perla and I are the co-directors, and we do community engagement, strategic planning, technical assistance, grant making support, and facilitation, among other things, especially with community-based organizations, the nonprofit sector, and government serving communities. So really happy to be able to collaborate with Haggerty and with a partnership and other entities on this project.
Awesome, thank you. Great. So let's review our agenda for today. Um, we just went over introductions of the team today. Then we're gonna move into developing your narrative for your idea. We're gonna review the what, how, why, when, who of your idea. Then we'll also move into the how much narrative. We're gonna have some opportunities to practice, and then we're gonna close out with some resources. I also forgot to mention that before we start with the bulk of the workshop, we're gonna review some other helpful resources for grant making. Okay, I'm gonna pass it now over to Lenny, who's going to do an overview of some of the resources available to us. I'm gonna stop sharing and
Thank you, Perla. Okay, so there are so many grants and funding opportunities out there, and it can be really overwhelming. There are some amazing tools to help you search for grants, depending on what kind of organization you are, or if you're a local government, or if you're a tribe, that can help you filter. And if, for those of you that are in Washington State, the government has created a really amazing resource called the Washington Grant Hub. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here and show you this website, fundhub.washington.gov, and we'll share these links in the slides too afterwards. But this is a wonderful resource for Washington-based groups, organizations, towns, and tribes, where you can put in keyword searches, choose the sector in which you're doing work, the types of activities you're doing, and what kind of applicant you may be. There's more advanced filters here if you know what kinds of funds you're looking for. Perhaps you're looking for a loan to help upgrade your water infrastructure. Perhaps you're looking for a competitive prize that has less reporting, or maybe you're open to all of them and you want to take a look. So this has been a really great resource for Washington groups, and something that I hope other states follow suit as well, because it's a wonderful resource. The second resource I wanted to share is the Northwest Environmental Justice Center. We have a fine funding resource as well. And in addition to federal funding opportunities, we also have state and private and local funding opportunities on here. And given changes in federal funding policies, we know it's really important, especially for community-based groups, to have access to private philanthropy too. So right at the top of the page, we have resources for private philanthropy for Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, and for tribal and indigenous serving organizations and tribes as well. And I do want to speak a little bit to the federal funding landscape right now. We know that many groups have had federal funding impacts, whether funds have been frozen or terminated, and we're here to support you if you want to talk through resources for protecting your federal funds. We also know that federal funds may become tighter over the next couple of years. There may be less resources. And so it's always important to assess your own organization or group's risk tolerance and capacity when going for different funding opportunities. And so in today's presentation, we're hoping you'll be able to put together a pitch for a program that's important to you that you can use in a variety of contexts, including federal funds, but for other types of funding opportunities as well. And then Alai, would you share one last resource from our friends at University of Washington?
Yes, gladly. Thank you. I had the pleasure of being with our friends at University of Washington Center for Environmental Health Equity, who led this wonderful um, grant writing workshops in the past 2 months. And they share with us these resources that I recommend for anyone who's trying to do grant making in the environmental health sector right now. They first of all, they have a number of webinars on environmental justice screen tools, how do we use surveys to support grant making, as well as opportunities like Philanthropy Northwest Thriving Communities Grant Program, which is there's one that closed, but there's one of the programs that's open now. We'll share at the end of this workshop today. They also have this wonderful tribal communities webinar series around solar energy and other environmental issues impacting tribes. How do you do storytelling? How do you move from an idea to action to be able to implement a project in your community? And they have this workbook they have in English and Spanish as well. How do you handle fiscal sponsorships, fact sheets, and one piece that I want to share with you, they have all these mapping tools, capacity building, and grant writing resources, as well as other funding databases. But one piece that was really amazing for me to learn about, and it's a question that people had for this webinar, is this template. And we will share the link as well for this template. Is on their website, and it's for reviewing funding opportunities. One challenge that many of us face is when we get one of those funding grant descriptions, they're so long. I know that many of you have seen them, sometimes 70 pages, 90 pages, and you're so busy and maybe you're understaffed. Like, who's going to read all that to figure out if you're eligible even to apply? And so our colleagues at University of Washington, especially Leah, put together this piece. It's a template. And basically, you can download it. And what you can do is literally use this template to do a keyword search on the grant application and the grant description, the RFP. And you can just input amount. And then to the right here, you can write the amount, the deadline. And you can just find the deadline very quickly and put it here. Type of funding. These are usually keywords that you'll find in every RFP, request for proposals. And then you can just fill the blanks here. Eligible applicants. You can fill the blank. Funding priorities, eligible activities. And once you matching funds required, right? Do you have matching funds or not? And the goal is that once you finish just finding those key important facts about the grant opportunity, you can know like, oh, are we eligible? Does it make sense? Do I need to read this 90 pages or not? And so I really appreciated this tool. I want to make sure to share with you. And then the other piece that's really useful is that after reviewing this piece, then you can ask yourself these questions. Is my organization eligible to apply? Does my project idea fit the funding opportunities? Does it fit the eligible activities? Do I have enough time to prepare the application before the deadline? Because sometimes maybe there's not enough time, but maybe there is. Does my organization have the capacity to complete the project within the funding period? Does my organization have the capacity to manage this type of funding, right? Is it something that you have the infrastructure to hold, to be able to manage it internally? Does my organization have the matching funds required if there's a need for matching funds? And has the organization ever applied to this type of funding? Do I need to set up an account or register for anything? Right? Specifically, when there's particular kinds of government grants, you have to register to particular accounts. Is that something that needs to happen? And there's a need to allocate time and resources to make sure that that happens. And if you've answered yes to all these questions by the end, then you know that it's a good fit. And you can go ahead and read the entire RFA, RFP, or NOFO carefully before writing your application. But you don't have to read an application that maybe or you already now know that is not a good fit. So thank you so much, University of Washington Center for Environmental Health Equity. This has been a really great resource to be able to quickly figure out what kind of funding works for the organizations and communities we're working with. And I'll pass it now to Perla, I believe.
Yes, which actually I'm gonna pass it back to you, Alai, to kick us off on our workshop and developing your idea narrative. I'm gonna share my screen and then you can get started. Okay.
Well, something, that's really exciting for us about this workshop today is that we're just trying to figure out how do we tell the most effective and compelling story about our communities, right? And we begin by thinking about what are the needs or gaps in our communities to make them better, to make them safer, to make them healthier. Um, we think about what are some of the environmental or climate related ideas that you have to improve your community and to improve environmental health in your community. And so we begin from that big concept of what is the idea that each one of us has to improve environmental and climate issues in our community, so that then we can begin to figure out how we tell that story to other people to show that they should care as well, to make sure that they feel like, oh, I want to support that. I want to be a part of that change. And that's how funding decisions end up being made in the long run. So first, we have to get people's attention to be able to get them excited about subsidizing or supporting one of our projects. Next slide, please. And so all of us here, the three of us, have applied for big grants and thankfully being successful, getting big grants to be able to support community-based work in this sector. And here I want to share with you something that's a very simple tool that we've deployed before and that I use all the time. For any kind of grant making, this is what I do before I begin to write anything. And it makes it less overwhelming, less stressful, and sometimes even fun if I do it with other people in my team. So the first thing we want to make sure that we have clear is what is your idea? Just the what. What is the thing that needs to happen? Then who? What's the who? Who will it benefit and help? If I implement the what, who will it benefit and help? Then the how. How is it going to help people? And also, how do we implement it? What is required to make it happen? Then the why. Why is it needed? Why is it important? And that's important to think about important in the short term. What is the direct impacts right now? And then what may be some long-term impacts? And then the when. What is the timeline? How much time do you need to make it happen? That is really key to be able to write a compelling narrative that people realize is feasible or is realistic and can actually happen in the time frame and the resources that you have. And so I'm going to give you a moment to sit with that. Because if you think about it carefully, it's just how we tell any other story. It could be a family story. It could be about growing up as children, and we share that with our children or with our neighbors or friends. Every story has a what, a who, a how, a why, and a when, so that we can get other people excited about the story and get them engaged with us. And so in this case, we're going to think about in my specific community, if there's an environmental challenge, What is that challenge? And what is the idea to solve that challenge? Who will be benefited if we address that challenge in the way that we propose with this idea? How exactly will they be benefited? And how will this be implemented to produce that benefit? The why is needed, and then the when. What is the timeline to make it happen? And I'm thinking I'm going to offer you an example. I'm going to give you an example for a project that I collaborated with Lenny and Perla called the Oregon Water Futures Collaborative. Just because it's a very easy, straightforward project to also find online and see the work and to get a sense of how you tell these kinds of stories, right? That's a project that's about ensuring that people who usually don't have a voice in water policy making, advocacy, and also in water restoration projects and stewardship get to have a voice. Low-income communities, rural communities, tribal communities, communities of color, who usually are disenfranchised in water conversations, get to talk about their water stories and get to say, this is what we need, and these are the solutions that we have. That's an idea, very clear idea, right? And then we think about, okay, who will it benefit? Oh, it will benefit those communities who get to finally be part of that decision making, to get to implement their own solutions to water challenges in their communities. And it can also benefit the communities overall in Oregon, water care in Oregon that impacts all communities in Oregon in the long run, right? So the who can be at the beginning small, but then we can see how it can be expansive. The how is it going to help people? Oh, we are going to implement a Water Justice Leadership Institute that will build capacity among those communities to be able to do advocacy work, to do water stewardship. They will come together over 12 weeks, once a week, learn from people who do water work, share their own stories and projects, and develop their own community projects. So that's a how. The why. Why is it needed? Because we've identified a gap that in state water investments and policy making, these communities are not considered, right? Have not been historically considered or engaged. And therefore, their drinking water needs at work, at home, when they go to the river for recreation and for other purposes are not being taken into account. So we have all these needs in the water. We have people who are drinking water that's not safe or they think is not safe. There's some real public health potential challenges for communities that are unseen and unaddressed by the entities that usually care for those resources in the state. And now we have a solution to be able to bring them on board to be part of the solution to that challenge. And then the when. Well, it depends on the grant. It could be, well, I have 12 weeks, I need to fund this part of the project, but maybe I have a part of the project that's a year long or 5 years long. And so we can think about pieces of the project in different time frames, right? For the short term and for the long-term impacts. So that's just a quick example of how you can turn an idea into something more concrete by asking these kinds of questions. But it's key that you are as specific as possible about the who's impacted and the how you're going to implement it and how are people going to be helped, as well as the why it matters for them and for other people as well. So I'll stop now and we're going to give you a few minutes to be able to kind of sit with these questions and how is it that your idea could be told in this kind of format.
So yeah, as Alai said, feel free to pause the video and take a few minutes to write down your ideas using the questions and the tool that Alai just shared. The what, the who, the how, the why, and the when. And the cool thing is that once you take the time to write down your idea using the questions and you develop the narrative for your idea, you can have a template that you can use for multiple opportunities that you can feel free to copy and paste and also develop your pitch for when you're meeting with funders. So take a few minutes. Okay, great. Awesome. Thank you. Um, Now we're gonna move into our next piece, which is how to develop the narrative for your grant application. This is a narrative that is going to be helpful for you when you're asking for funding for your idea. So now we've developed this narrative for your idea that is going to be crucial to describe in grant applications, but also when you're talking to funders. This grant narrative is going to help you exactly say what you need to be able to make your idea happen. And we're going to take the same questions that we reviewed earlier with Alai to develop your grant narrative. So let's look at the what. What is needed to make this a reality? Is it people that you need? Is it tangible materials? Is it training for your team? So, for example, if you're going to start a new project, but maybe you need more capacity within your team, maybe you'll want to bring a project manager. And maybe that project manager will need some type of software to manage the program as well. Or is it printing materials, flyers? Is it testing equipment? And probably the people that you bring into your team might also need some type of training or leadership development opportunities. So it's important to identify all those things that you'll need in your project. Again, what is it that you need to make your idea possible? And this also helps you to assess what you currently have in your organization. So take that opportunity to also describe that. What do you currently have in your organization? And what do you need that you don't already have? The who. Who do you need to get involved to make your idea a reality? Is it other funders? Is it other partner organizations? Is it subcontractors? Make a list of the people who are going to help you make your idea a reality. Grant makers want to know if you have a coalition and if you have backup, from the community, from other funders, from government entities. So make sure you develop that list. The why for this is, of course, when you ask yourself, why do I need funding? It's because maybe you don't have the funding to make your idea a reality. But in this case, the why is be ready to explain why is it that you need the things that you need, no? The people, the materials, the training. Why is it that you need other funders, other partner organizations? Be ready to explain the why for each of the questions for whenever you meet with funders and whenever you are developing your narrative for your grant application. The next part, the when, what is the timeline to get the funding? So remember for the previous example when we were developing your idea, that's the timeline for the project, right? For this one, it's the timeline to get the funding, right? So you wanna develop the timeline for your idea, but to be able to accomplish that, you'll need a timeline to get the funding to be able to hire the people, to get the materials, to get the training. So what is that timeline? When? And how much? This is the most important question for a grant narrative. How much do you need? How much does it cost to get your idea going? And how much do you already have? When you meet with funders, that is one of the questions that they want to know. How much do you already have? In commitments, in actual cash, and how much do you need? Be ready to answer those questions. and also put it in your grant application if asked. And this is also the part where you develop your budget. When you list the things from the what and the who and the when, assign a cost to each line item. How much will it cost to get a project manager? How much will the materials cost? How much will the training cost? And you can get this information by one, using Google, two, looking at similar projects that your organizations have worked at, or three, asking your networks that have done similar work. And this is how you develop your grant narrative that, again, you can also use for multiple grant applications. If you have a template just answering these simple questions in a document, you can apply to that to different applications. So now, take a few minutes, pause the video, and use this template to develop your grant narrative. Great. Now I'm gonna pass it over to Alai, who's gonna take us through a real life example on how would we develop our idea into a grant application. Stop sharing. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Perla, for that great description of how you begin to put a budget together, a budget narrative together. I find that to be always kind of a little nerve-wracking on my end. So you just simplified it and made it so straightforward. If I just ask myself those questions, you can just write that first and then work on my budget, little kind of lines and budget line items. So thank you for that. Well, so I want to say a few things as we move into the last part of our webinar today, which is a moment to think about how you can turn your idea, the idea that you have for your community, into something that can be funded by a specific grant application. And something that, of course, we always find as a challenge is that we have an idea. But it's very rare that we find a grant that exactly says things like we want to say them, or that describes the work exactly as we want to describe it. And so we have to learn how to read the grant application to find keywords that allow us to connect and be like, oh, it may not say exactly the same thing I'm saying, but actually can fund the kind of work that I'm doing. I just have to pay attention to these keywords to make sure that when I write about my idea, it actually matches the criteria shared by the grant. And so we're gonna do a little bit of that right now. What it means is that we have our idea, we have our story that we've already drafted by answering those questions that we shared before. And then we can begin to look at a grant application and see, oh, it fits, and this is how I can tell that story in this context, in this format. So I'll be sharing some tips around that. Now, the first thing I'll say is it's important to remember that funders are human beings. This, if it could be any of us who's been asked to be in a committee to select who'll get funding, right? And we're human beings who care about something. And so when we tell our story, we want to appeal to that kind of that component, our humanity, right? Like, let's make it exciting for people. Let's make it so that when they go home after that selection committee meeting, they're like, I'm proud that I selected this project in a community because I was in that meeting. They got 50,000, they got 500,000, they got 1 million to do something wonderful and productive in a community. And people feel good. Funders feel good for funding good work. And so you want to give them enough information and specific enough information that your application is the one they pick. And that they pick it because it meets the criteria, but also because it's exciting and something that it could be a government agency worker, or it could be a philanthropic a staff member from an organization. When they go home that night, they feel happy that they supported your work. So I just want to name that as part of like how we think about the storytelling process. Now, today I'm going to share this funding opportunity that I really like because the application is not hard. And of course, we know that the federal and government grant making processes right now, there's been a lot of like programs that have closed and so on and so forth. But there's still some open and some that we can still apply and see and have access to resources as well. So there's hope has is not all lost. There's still possibilities and opportunities. And also because if you write something for an application like this one that I will share with you right now, which is so straightforward, it will give you the basic components you need for other applications, whether for government opportunities or for foundation opportunities or other kinds of funding out there. So this is the Philanthropy Northwest Thriving Communities Grant Making Program Non-Compete Grants. We'll be sharing the link along with this webinar. And these non-compete grants are intended to support equitable distribution of resources across Region 10, ensuring that historically underserved areas receive the support they need. Eligible applicants are severely capacity-constrained organizations, those with budgets under 500,000, or those serving areas with populations of 50,000 people or fewer. So I'm going to take a step back and look at keywords here slowly. This is what we do. We just read carefully this first description. So we know that they're looking at, first of all, resources in Region 10. So you're in Washington, you're in Region 10, you qualify. And you can just make sure that you're in Region 10 to qualify. I see another keyword here, which is historically underserved areas. And so I want to make sure that in my narrative, I use that language, historically underserved areas. Another keyword we see here is severely capacity constrained organizations, right? So this is who they're trying to fund, and they define what that means for them. So we don't have to guess. What does it mean to be severely capacity constrained? My budget as an organization is under 500,000, or we serve in an area with populations of 50,000 people or fewer, which for the most part tend to be rural areas, right? So very likely this is an organization that has a budget of under 500,000 and that is in a rural area or in a town with 50,000 people or fewer would qualify. So either one of those two categories would allow you to qualify for this grant opportunity. So keywords, and you can write this down if you need to write the keywords. That's what I do. I just highlight my keywords. Is in Region 10, supporting historically underserved areas, and my budget has to be less than 500,000 as an organization, or I need to be serving populations of 50,000 people or fewer. And in my experience, if there's a definition like this one and you meet both, that's amazing. If you, your organization has $500,000 or less in funding, and you serve populations of 50,000 people or fewer, amazing. You highlight that out. You actually meet both criterias. So those are the keywords that we're going to work with right now. And that's how you assess if you qualify. Now we are going to start. And what I love about this application is that this is the form. You can apply right here. Now, as Linny has taught me before, I like to, any writing I do, put in a Word document separately before, because we don't want to just write everything in here. We lose the internet, electricity, and then we lose everything we wrote. So that's something that Linny has taught me before, and she's right. We write everything separately, and then we can copy paste into the online form. Now, the first thing we have here is that we get to confirm eligibility. In this case is check the box only if your project does not involve the following activities. In other words, your project cannot engage in any of these activities. Otherwise, it is not eligible. lobbying, legal advice, services, or representation, inherently religious activities, such as worship, prayer, proselytizing, or religious instruction, and you have not been suspended or debarred from receiving federal funding to conduct activities as a grantee or subgrantee of any department within the federal government. So from the beginning, we make sure that none of these apply to your organization, and then you can confirm your eligibility. Then we move on to the next question, which is to make sure that you actually meet the basic requirements. And you can get to click, my organization budget is less than 500,000. My organization serves areas with 50,000 people or less, or both. And as long as you have clicked one of these three buttons here, three checkboxes, you qualify. Below, you get to just input your organization's name, EIN number, which is very regularly used for applications. Make sure that you have an employee identification number associated with your organization. That's key. And you get to state here if you have registered in the Flux grant management system. Yes, no, don't know. It's not required here. It's just for them to know if this is support that you need as well, if you get the grant. Then we move on to just regular contact information. Who are the people in charge? Do you have a fiscal sponsor that's holding the funding for the project? That is besides the CBO itself or organization or tribe. And then we get to go to the section which is about the storytelling. And this is where these previous exercises will be useful. The what, the who, the how, the why, the when, the how much. This is where you get to bring that all together to tell a story, but also tapping into the language of the application itself. So we get to have a project title. I always encourage people to have a title that's descriptive of the work and the kinds of solutions you have to offer. Also, maybe naming your location could be useful in the title too, just to highlight that you're meeting that need of location and so on and so forth. In this case, we're talking about environmental and climate work. Highlighting that piece is important. No more than 10 words, so it has to be short and succinct. Then we get to provide a project executive summary. This should include a description of your problem or need statement. Please include the project community, tribal government, project location, and how the project will improve or enhance the project community. And you get 1,000 characters maximum. It's very short, right? And so you get to just go direct to the point. What's the problem? And what's the idea? Who will be benefited, right? Which community will be improved or enhanced by this project? And see that I'm using the language that they use here, improvement and enhancement. How will that improvement happen? How will people benefit? How will the environment or climate benefit? Why? Why would they benefit, right? And what is the issue that this will solve, or at least partially solve or address? Why? Why does it matter? Why should other people care and also be proud and happy to support this with funding and resources? And when is it going to happen? Right? Just very briefly stating the timeline makes it clear to the selection committee that you have a realistic plan to implement. So if you state exactly the timeline, it always shows to people, I know exactly how long it will take to make this happen and to be successful. That is the project executive summary. Very important to name the exact work. Be as explicit as possible about the exact work, even if it's concise and short, just to be clear about what's the work that's going to happen. Now, in this one, it's really nice because they also include this other question, which allows you to expand on the work. What is the environmental issue you and your project community will address with the proposed project? And here you get more space. You get 3,000 maximum characters. So here you get to really tell us what is the issue? What is the problem, the environmental problem? If you have any kind of stories, any data that show like this is a problem and we've documented it this way. We have chronic asthma in our community. We have children in school with high rates of asthma. We know the source is this one, and this is how we're proposing the solution to this problem, or how we plan to mitigate this issue and the impact on our children. Um, that's an example, right? Like that's an environmental issue, and then you get to say the what and how you will address it, and who will be impacted, and why it is important. Then we they also have done this beautiful job of allowing you to just click. Which one of the following environmental categories does your project address? You will not be scored on the environmental categories. And if you do not see the category that you're addressing, you can actually add it in the end under other. And so this is just for them to get a sense of what may be the issues that your project is specifically addressing. But if you don't find the issue here, you can also add it under other as well. And they include emergency preparedness and resilience, environmental job training, healthy homes that are water and energy efficient. So the descriptions of projects can be very wide and broad. So feel free to also include in other if you don't find yours here. Don't feel deterred by this list. This is not a limiting list. It's just possibilities for you to consider. Now here we go. They're asking us directly. Remember how in the description they talk about how they want to support underserved communities, historically underserved communities. Here you get to tell us in maximum 3,000 characters how the project's community is disadvantaged or not. They also encourage that you talk about health or environmental indicators to provide a narrative on these issues. So it's being explicit here about the who, going back to the exercise from before, who will be benefited. Here you can expand on that and talk about who are the people who benefit the most, who are the most impacted, how will this actually address the need they have, and how they have been historically underserved as a community in the environmental and health sector. So you get to share that here very explicitly. Is it children, adults, seniors? Is it immigrant communities, tribal communities, Black communities? Is it youth that are being trained in some kind of way in the environmental sector? You get to be very explicit about them and why how they're disadvantaged in the work that you're doing, and why it's important to support them through this funding opportunity. This is also a good opportunity. I just want to add to state how is it that the target demographic, the target community who will be benefit from the project is excited and looking forward to the work as well. If you haven't, this is nice. Not all grants have this, but you get to state that here as well. And then the other information in this application is, demographic, in which state in Region 10 you find yourself, Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, zip code. You get to select all county, borough, tribal areas within Region 10 that your proposed project will be located. And so you get to just check a box. And you sign. And so I love this as a great example of also for people who maybe this is the first time you apply to a funding opportunity, or you're just in the beginning stages of getting funding support for your organization. I find this to be a really friendly way, friendly application to begin writing a narrative, because you get to write those concise descriptions of the what, who, how, why, when, how much. And then you get to expand on them if needed for longer applications and other funding opportunities. So I'm going to stop my share, and we'll be sharing this Philanthropy Northwest Driving Communities Grant non-compete opportunity with you as well, and in the links with the webinar. Again, it's rare to find this kind of applications. I feel that I want to share that as much as possible. and also for beginning grant writing CBOs is a great place to practice and then to then use that for other opportunities as well. And I think I want to open the floor for any last tips or advice that Lenny or Perla may have for people as we begin to wrap up.
This was so helpful. Thank you, Perla and Alai. I learned a lot. One thing that I see often for especially groups who are used to doing work on a shoestring budget, so like frontline communities, really capacity constrained local governments, you all are so used to doing so much work with so little money. It is amazing. And also, using the tool that Perla presented to really list out everything that you're needed. I just can't recommend that enough so that you can get super clear about what is all the things you need. Yes, we can do things on a shoestring budget, but do we have to? And who are the groups that are getting fully, funded work and who is only getting partially funded work? And how many hours of volunteer time are folks giving as a result of that? So when you lay out every single need, you just get a much more realistic budget that better matches you so that you can do this work and your community can do this work for the long haul. So that's just one thing I see a lot with CBO groups, and we always try to encourage to boost that number or make your pitch, like the work you're gonna do, a little bit smaller with the amount of money. Um, and it's a practice for sure to work on that, and it gets really hard sometimes to say, okay, what do we end up cutting when everything is very exciting. So that's one thing I've seen a lot, but otherwise, at the end of the day, grant writing can be very intimidating. But the way that you all put it, Perla and Ali, that it's actually storytelling, and you all, like, community is so good at telling stories. So let's take that skill, that asset that you already have, and just put it, code switch a little bit to fit a funding application. But that, like, root skill of storytelling, we have that. You all have that. And we can reframe that writing into the storytelling piece, and they make the best applications anyway. So yeah, those are my last little bits. Thanks, Alai and Perla. I learned a lot today from you.
Yeah, thank you all for tuning in and listening to this webinar. We hope you learned a lot from us and from the tools that we share with you. Utilize the links that Lenny and Alai shared at the beginning. They have a lot of great resources and templates for you to use as you are developing your grant applications. And with that, Alai, if you don't have anything else to share, I think we can end our webinar. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and have a great rest of your day. Thank
Thank
you. Muchas
you.
gracias.
Yes, bye.